Recording in progress.
Why is that happening?
I don't know. I keep hearing an echo and you are the lowest voice I hear, Rabbi.
Okay, well,
That's better.
the mic is right here. I can't put it any closer, but it should be loud. No, it's good now, Mike. Mike, it's good.
The echo is gone.
Yeah, the echo's gone. Everything's on. It's confusing because it shows up as two different computers, my computer and then yeah, it's a good idea. That's good. I didn't change it. Oh, you know why? Because I think because it logs in, because it's logged in so that it can. Oh, okay. Anyways, we will see if we can change this. But it's good to see everybody tonight. We have we're just talking, Mike and I were just talking about the Dodger game, which is also starting right about now. Dodgers and Giants. It's very early in the season, but people are already getting into it. And we just celebrated or just began the new month, the Rosh Chodesh for right now the months are kind of lined up. So Rosh Chodesh was on the 2nd. So May 2nd was Monday and Rosh Chodesh ER. And today was Yom HaZikaron, was Israel Memorial Day. And then tonight and sundown begins Yom HaAtzmaut, the 4th of the month of Hebrew month of ER, is Israel Independence Day, which is which a couple things as we talk about every year. This holiday in Israel Independence Day, is preceded by the Israel Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, which goes literally right into Independence Day. We've talked about before. I think I talk about it every year, how it would be really appropriate to have Memorial Day maybe right before Independence Day, because again, in Israel, they never forget the sacrifices that were made to make sure that Israel would exist and that Israel would remain free and safe. It's not just a day to remember the soldiers who died in wars. It's also Israel Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron. Today is also a time to remember people who perished in missions for the Mossad, for Shin Bet, which is Israel's essentially FBI. So it's not just the Israeli army that is remembered on this day, but also people who are in the clandestine forces and also part of Israel's security apparatus that is configured slightly differently than ours. And then again, you go right into Israel Independence Day, which you never forget the connection between the two. We say that every year. It'd be appropriate if we did that in this country, probably, so that people would connect the importance of both holidays. But the interesting thing about Israel Independence Day is because it's on the Hebrew calendar, we celebrate it on the Hebrew calendar. It's an interesting thing that happens. So as we talked about, every 19 years, they line up. So the day of Israel's creation on the secular calendar, right? So Israel was established in 1948. And you probably know where I'm going with this. Israel Independence Day, I was just checking to make sure people were online on Facebook. So Israel Independence Day is the 4th of ER on the Hebrew calendar. Every year Israel celebrates its national independence on the Hebrew calendar. So this year it happens to be May 5th, tomorrow or tonight, May 4th to May 5th. The world recognizes Israel's independence on May 14th. So every year, I'm going to try to show you a picture. Every year is when Israelis are celebrating Israel Independence Day on our Hebrew calendar, Palestinians celebrate May 14th as Nakba, is the day of catastrophe for them, right? So they celebrate or commemorate they commemorate Israel's Independence Day as their day of tragedy. So what's interesting about it is that I'm trying to show you a picture. Israel Independence Day is oh wait, hold on a second. 1 second. Israel Independence Day is Israel Independence Day is not, there's no issue with Palestinians protesting on this day, because it's not, when they protest on their day, on their Nakba day, it's not Israel Independence Day. So the protests don't go on that day. I can't find the picture that I just got sent by. So Rob Hershenson sent me a picture. His daughter Allison is at UCSD, and he sent me a picture today from the protests that were going on at UCSD against Israel. So, so what they did is they put up some anti-Israel stuff on the campus today, knowing that today is Israel Independence Day and Israel Memorial Day, and so they intentionally did it. I can't find, I can't remember where he sent me the picture, but on what social media site he sent it to me. Oh, let me just look one other place. No, I can't find it. So yeah, I mean, there are people who intentionally protest against Israel this week because they know that Israel celebrates, and Jews around the world commemorate Israel independence this week, today or tomorrow. And there is an event that the Israel consulate is doing here in LA over at in the city tonight. They did one last night at Sinai Temple, and they're doing something tonight at the Temple of the Arts over on Wilshire. So, so ideally, the protests don't have to happen on this time, but again, people do try to make Israel Independence Day a sad day by protesting and by, doing stuff against Israel this week. And then some people will do it on May 14th, on the day that Palestinians called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So it is interesting that. How do I put my hand up? Somebody just put me on sound. Anyways, it is interesting that people, there are competing holidays, competing days that could be used by people, but whatever. That being said, we're definitely thinking about Israel today, and we're connecting to our text, and we're connecting to the land of Israel, other than the fact that tonight, right now, we're going to go to Egypt. We're going to make our journey to the land of Egypt, and I'm going to place our text up here for everybody to see, because yeah, this week we go to Israel for a very brief moment, but other than that, we're in Egypt this week, next week, the last couple of weeks of Genesis, which is what we're in right now. We're in the last chapter, so we're in the last 7 or 8 chapters, if you will, of Genesis, and I'm going to now show this section that we're going to be reading tonight.
Hey, Rabbi.
Sorry, yeah?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I just texted with my son, Philip.
Yeah.
Who's at Irvine. And he didn't see any protests, but he did see a Chabad booth. So just letting you know.
Oh, good, because Irvine's had the lot.
Yeah, they have. Anyway, moving on.
I would show you the sign that they put up, the display that they put up. I can't find it, but it talked about the apartheid wall, and yeah, it was the kind of anti-Israel garbage that we see frequently from. Yeah, I can't. Unfortunately, folks, I'm sorry, I can't. I thought I had it, but I don't remember when I can't find it. But trust me when I tell you, it was offensive, and it was. Oh yeah, here it is. I got it. He sent it to me, and he sent it to the Chabad rabbi. So let me Let me just pop it down on here so you can see what they did. And let me just pop this up here for you. This was put up on the, I'm trying to make it a little bit bigger so you can see. Here you go. So this was up at school today. So, here's the anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism does not equal anti-Semitism, peace talks, showing that settlements are destroying. I thought I saw something else too. Talked about the apartheid wall. So here's the, in the different times that Israel has defended itself years, and showing, that they're showing that, many more Palestinians have been killed than Israelis. So it says deaths in last Operation Cast Lead, Protective Edge, and it's showing how many deaths versus how many civilian deaths. So again, this is trying to show, trying to show, talk about the Gaza situation, about what Gaza looks like. Anyway, so this was up in the school today, in the main area. So, again, it was done on Israel Independence Day and Israel Memorial Day. I mean, again, I would go by and say, nobody denies the fact that Palestinians have been killed. A larger amount of Palestinians have been killed, but again, nobody has told Palestinians that they need to launch missiles into Israel, and how are they going to expect for there to be a punitive response? So again, it's one of those weird equivalencies that are not equivalencies. So what can I tell you? So where we're in Egypt, we're starting in Egypt because we left off in Egypt. We left off last week. We read chapters 42 and 43 from the story of Genesis, and where we left off is that Benjamin is now in Egypt. He got Joseph got his wish. He got his brother taken down, his full brother Benjamin, his only full brother, the other son through Rachel, and he's got him there now. And what he has seen is that the brothers are all sitting together, and he saw it, the last things we read are that here he has this meal when they've gone back to Egypt to ask for food the second time. He sees Benjamin, his mother's son, and this is the first time he's seen Benjamin, in 20 years, over 20 years. And so he's overcome by emotion, because it says, he says to the boy, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." And with that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother and was on the verge of tears. And he went into the room and wept there. And then he washed his face, he reappeared, and now in control of himself, gave the order to serve the meal. So we can see, as we read last week, that the Egyptians ate at one table and the Hebrews dealt at another table. So the Hebrews and Egyptians couldn't sit together. And we read that as they were seated there, from oldest to youngest, it says the men looked at one another in astonishment. Assumingly, again, the Egyptians look over at these guys and they're all amazed at how, well, we don't know exactly what they saw, but different interpretations are they were very impressed with the way these Hebrews looked. The other possibility is they all look like their father. And so they were amazed that all these kids just looked like different versions. They were almost like clones of Jacob. And so they were amazed at that. Whatever it is, they are looking at them, as it says, in astonishment. And then it says portions were served from his table, but Benjamin's portions was several times out of anyone's else's. And they drank their fill with him. So even though they're not eating at the same table, they're serving them from Joseph's table. So they don't eat at the same table, but they're being served the same food. Now, if you're wondering, is this kosher food? The rabbis, of course, say that this is kosher food. There's no way that Jacob and his family are not eating kosher food. It's very possible that, the argument easily could be made that when you're dining in the house of the head of Egypt, you eat whatever you're served, which is what I was told a long time ago. When you go to someone's house, you eat what they serve you. There's no description of the food that they had, other than, of course, it says that they also were drinking. Now, it doesn't say, what does the King James, by the way, say there? By the way, they drank were merry with him, right? What's interesting here is that it says, and they drank their fill with him, because the word vaishtu would be just simply they drank, but it also says vaiskeru. And this word implies alcohol, which is why the King James is a better translation there. They drank and were merry. The word vaiskeru implies not even wine, even necessarily, but alcohol, like spirits. Because this root, my friends, vaishkeru, it's where we get the word shikar from. Yeah, it's a Hebrew word which made its way into Yiddish, right? And a shikar is someone what's a shikar? It's a drunk, right?
Mhm.
So it clearly means that this is an alcoholic. There's alcohol flowing here. It doesn't just say they drank. They drank and they drank alcohol. So, and again, it seems like it's harder alcohol. And so as we continue on, now Joseph is going to play a little trick on his brothers, which he's done before. He played a trick on them in the first place by giving them their money back when they first went down, when they first came for food. So now he's going to play a trick on them again. Now, he has a reason why he's doing this. Obviously, he has a plan. What's interesting about this is that it also, people sometimes say, well, this seems like such a weird thing that Joseph does here. And obviously he has a reason to do it. He has a motivation. They don't even know who he is, obviously, but families do play pranks on each other all the time. I mean, it's part of what families do. They play tricks on each other. And if it's a surprise, a surprise party, or somebody comes and they're surprise their family by showing up and they don't tell them. I mean, you can make the argument that, like, most of us, even if we have a good sense of humor, we don't play pranks on people that often. Sometimes it's because, like, we just don't know the people that well. But you can make the argument that, like, 90% of the pranks you'll ever commit or you'll ever do are to family members. Unless you're really, really close to someone, you don't prank them. And this is definitely a prank of the highest order, as we're about to see what Joseph does. So there is something funny about this, in the sense that he has a plan, and it's a much bigger plan than just, I'm going to play a prank on them. But there is something interesting about this, in that there is a truth to this about pranks. Now, this is more, but I always say, this is where we learn how to prank each other. It's from our family. So here's what he says. He instructed his house steward as follows: fill the men's bags with food as much as they can carry, and put each one's money in the mouth of the bag. Same trick that he did before, but this one's different. put my silver goblet in the mouth of the bag of the youngest one, together with his money for the rations. And he did as Joseph told him. With the first light of morning, the men set off with their pack animals. They had just left the city and had not gone far when Joseph said to his house steward, "Up, go after those men. And when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why did you repay good with evil?' It is the very one from which my master drinks and which he uses for divination. It was a wicked thing for you to do." That's the quote. So that's what Joseph tells his house steward to say. So he told the house steward what to do, and now he tells them what to do as they go. So the house steward's in on it. And as we mentioned last week, there is a midrash, there's an explanation that the house steward is none other than his own son, Menashe, for various reasons. One, because he can trust Menashe. It's, no one's going to rat on him or tell the Pharaoh or tell someone else in Egypt what's going on. Can be all held within the family. And there's another important piece of this, which is that only one of the family, only one of Jacob's kids and now grandkids, only someone with Jacob's blood can pull this off. These are like superhuman people, right? And so you can't just send someone after these people because like they're faster, stronger than other people. And so you're going to have to get someone who has the same kind of powers that they do. Menashe is the only one, or Ephraim, but that only one of these of Jacob's family can do this. So this is all part of the midrash of who would have been entrusted with this mission, this continuation of this test, prank. Who knows the way this is going to end? Anyone else want to say anything weird about what we just read? Anybody?
Well, it's obvious he's still upset and angry and needs to do something for revenge, for him to feel better inside.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. He's not done. He hasn't
Right.
seen his brother Benjamin. That was not enough to see Benjamin, right? Seeing Benjamin was only part of what he needed to do. I mean, definitely wasn't enough. There's a weird thing here too. I mean, you're absolutely right. But there's a weird thing we just read. Did anyone want to say about that last sentence we just read? It's this part right here. My master drinks from it and he uses it for divination. What the heck's going on there? What's going on? Like, I mean, we know Joseph is considered very wise and he's interpreted dreams for the Pharaoh, but was he doing magic? I mean, there's something weird here. And again, the rabbis feel uncomfortable with it because they definitely don't want Joseph doing any they don't want him doing magic. And the word that's used here is nachesh yenachesh, which at its root has the same word as snake, nachash. But it's some type of necromancy or sorcery or something with snakes or something with, it doesn't have to be snakes, but it's the root. But it's some type of magic. And the rabbis definitely don't like the fact that Joseph is doing magic because Jews aren't supposed to be doing magic. Jews aren't supposed to be doing sorcery. So there's different interpretations given here that kind of get Joseph off the hook for doing any kind of magic right now, which is, again, maybe he only uses the cup as an illusion, he really does have powers, but he uses the cup to make them think that he's a magician like them because his powers come from God. And so the cup is actually a distraction. It's the thing that he uses as a magician to keep everyone's attention. It's like his top hat, right? It's like his cane, his magic wand. There's really no power there, but people watch that while he's actually doing his real magic. But his real magic comes from inside. It comes from God. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that, he doesn't really do magic. He's just pretending, and it's, they all think he's doing magic. He's not even pretending. He doesn't even try to do magic. It's just they think he's magic. The Egyptians think that he must have magic, and that he's not even attempting to do magic. Look, the point is that this is Joseph's goblet. It's his. But the fact that it's attached some way to magic is kind of weird. And it's going along with this idea that Joseph has powers. So he overtook them and spoke those words to them. And they said to him, "Why does my Lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything of the kind." Because they haven't even gotten, like last time, they knew that they had them when they unpacked their stuff at the first night. When they left, they saw that they had inadvertently, they didn't know what happened, but they didn't intend to. Here, they haven't even opened up their packs yet. They have no way to know. So they said, "We didn't do anything. No, we never did such thing." Bless you. So he says, "Here we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money that we found in the mouths of our bags. How then could we have stolen any silver or gold from your master's house? We didn't even have anything. We brought back the stuff that we had the last time. Whichever of your servants it is found with shall die. The rest of us, moreover, shall become slaves to my Lord." So they've literally just condemned themselves. They had no reason to believe. Now, it's a fairly bold thing to say. And given the fact that they happened to them before, it's a very stupid thing for them to say.
Yes.
Very careless, because it's not like they've been tricked with the same trick before. So why would in a million years would they say, "Yeah, go ahead and kill whoever did it"? You know that it's possible that this happened. The first thing that would have happened out of my mouth would have been, "Oh no, not again."
Right.
But these guys are swearing up and down, "We didn't do anything."
Right.
So they've already put their foot in it again. This is what they said: "One of us will die, the rest of you shall become the rest of us shall become slaves." He replied, this is what the master of the house says: "Although what you are proposing is right, only the one with whom it is found shall be slave." I'm not killing it. We're not going to kill anybody. But by the way, this is the master of the house saying that. He's speaking on behalf of Joseph, but "The rest of you shall go free." So each one hastened to lower his bag to the ground, and each one opened the bag. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the goblet turned up in Benjamin's bag. So they started with the oldest. They started with Reuben, and they worked all the way down. So the drama builds up every time they open up a bag. And then finally they find Benjamin's bag. They find the goblet. As they rent their clothes, each reloaded his pack animal, and they returned to the city. Now, you just saw what happened. The master of the house said, "Only the one who was responsible is going to be my slave." It said, "The rest of you shall go free." Now, does that mean they have to come back to the city for them to go free? Or could they have just gone free from that moment? But they all go back to Egypt, and they rent their clothes. They tore their clothes like somebody died. That's what we use, vaikre, which is like kriya. We call when we rip our clothes when someone dies. It's kriya. So they go back to the city. And here is the critical moment is coming on us. When Judah and his brothers re-entered the house of Joseph, who was still there, they threw themselves on the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this deed you have done? Do you not know that a man like me practices divination?" Now, this is weird because now you see this divination is part of his game, which is he's playing a game on them where not only does he not tell them who he is, he's essentially telling them that I use this cup for divination, which is like the least likely thing that their brother should be doing. They really don't suspect that it is him. And he's basically telling them that I use this cup for doing things that really a Jewish boy shouldn't be doing, a Jewish man shouldn't be doing. Teller's Jewish, David Copperfield's Jewish. We give you a list. Harry Houdini was Jewish. David Blaine is Jewish. Oh yeah. He has Primo Levi's number from the Nazis tattooed. He has Primo Levi's number on him. Yeah, this is, we understand. We understand that this is, we're supposed to not be doing divination, right? Yes, this is more like something you'd see in the occult. Now, what's interesting about this too, let's look at it real carefully. It says Judah and his brothers. So what happened in this moment is that Judah asserts his leadership of his brothers. He's the fourth oldest brother, but it said right here, Judah and his brothers. So Judah is taking leadership right away. And again, it's probably a little bit of a tip that this is written by the J author, the author who is descendant of Judah, because he just had his ancestor step up and speak on behalf of everybody. He's the lead guy. And so Joseph starts right off with him, "You're trying to take away my powers." And Judah replied, "What can we say to you, my lord? How can we plead? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered the crime of your servants. Here we are then, slaves of my lord. The rest of us, as much as he who is in possession, the goblet was found." But he replied, "Far be it from me to act thus. Only the one in whose possession the goblet was found shall be my slave. The rest of you go back in peace to your father." And so Judah says to him, "What can we say? We're guilty." So right off the bat, he knows they didn't do anything, but he says, "What can I tell you? The evidence is here." He doesn't deny it, but he says, all of us are responsible. All of us. So if that guy's responsible, we're all responsible. To which Joseph says, no, only the person who has the goblet, meaning Benjamin, is going to stay. The rest of you go back, and it says, in peace, shalom. You go back in peace to your father. It's all going to be okay. So that's the end of the portion. So if we were reading this as a Torah portion, this is now the end of Miketz. All of this, from the time that Joseph is in the jail, coming out to this moment, is all one portion. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff. Yep. And normally we read this, as we said, Hanukkah time. So we read this back this year in December, end of November, beginning of December. So we read this several months ago.
And did I miss something, Rabbi? Didn't he also have his servant put all the guys' money back in all them?
Yeah.
In all their bags, and they're not mentioning that.
Not mentioned at all. So the money is brushed aside because the focus all becomes on this goblet, right? That this is because this is Joseph's goblet. The money is just to put it mildly, or to put it succinctly, it is Egypt's money. That's the money.
Irrelevant.
And that's the money that they owe. That was the money that they're owed. But now they've stolen from Joseph. And this is what Joseph did.
Okay.
Joseph wants to make this a personal issue, right? Now,
yes,
the big question we have to ask ourselves is, we come to the end of the story or the end of the portion, and we normally would be ending right now with this idea, because our answer, look, this is not the end of the chapter. This is verse 17. Verse 18 is still part of the same chapter.
right.
Where we broke the story was, and this was a big cliffhanger, right? When we read it, the cliffhanger is, no, you guys can all go back. He stays. Now you're left with this idea, at least the way we set it up, which is that this is a setup for him to take possession of Benjamin. That all of this was a game so he could get Benjamin. That's the way the Torah portion is kind of laid out. So then we have to ask ourselves why. Why is Benjamin, why would the Torah give us a story where Benjamin, and it makes sense, Joseph wants to rescue Benjamin. Joseph wants Benjamin away from the rest of the brothers. That makes sense. That's the way it's been set up. That's what like one simple reading of this would give us. But here's the other issue. If Joseph wanted Benjamin, why does he just take Benjamin the moment he steps foot in the house and says, you know what, the rest of you, I'm getting rid of the rest of you. Or if all of you don't leave right now, I'll kill you because I want Benjamin to stay with me. That clearly isn't what Joseph wants to do. Now you could say, yes, because we know there's a test. This is going to be a test of them. But I don't know about that because the rabbis caught this. And I think this is the deeper understanding of it. I'm not sure that Joseph really was testing the brothers, whether they would defend Benjamin. So the rabbis answered it this way. Yeah, as a matter of fact, he's not really testing them. He wants to get Benjamin. And the only way he can get Benjamin is to do this. Why? Because he's one guy. And even though he's the most powerful guy in Egypt and can command the armies to do whatever they want, he's one guy with special powers. He's fighting 10. And if Benjamin's on with the brothers, he has to fight 11 superheroes who have superpowers that he can't deal with because they're all powerful. And the only way he can get Benjamin away from the brothers, this is the way we rabbis read it, is if they willingly leave him behind and there's no big fight. And so when he says to them, go back in peace, he's basically saying, we're not going to have a showdown here. You guys go back and he stays. Which is interesting because there really is this feeling like, no, this isn't really a test. This is his way, his ruse to keep hold of his brother and to get his brother without having a fight. And one can make the argument, let's say the superhero business isn't really the matter at hand. The rabbis felt comfortable with that, by the way. They loved that idea that these brothers, the Jacob sons, Joseph's brothers are all endowed with superhuman strength, etc. But let's just say that on behalf of Joseph's position with the rest of the Egyptians, if he does something weird, then he looks weird. The rest of the Egyptians are going to say, there's this really weird scene where Joseph had a bunch of guys killed for no reason and then took away one of the guys. So it could also be that Joseph wants to create a ruse so that he gets control of Benjamin and it doesn't look weird. I mean, it looks a little weird, but there's a justification for it. These guys are thieves. They came down here. The one who stole, the one who actually held the stuff, he got to hold on to. So there is really this weird idea because people understand there's a power imbalance here. There's no way that Joseph couldn't have killed these guys and just taken them. That's what I'm saying. If you understand that that's the implied power imbalance, that 11 shepherds from Canaan just came down and are having a battle with would have a battle with Joseph, you'd say there's no battle there. They could be wiped out and no one would ever know. The power imbalance is way out of line. But there is this factor that Joseph still has a reputation to maintain. He doesn't want to be seen having a fight or having to wipe out 11 guys who've just come down who are shepherds. People are like, what was that about? But if you can get a hold of Benjamin and do it in a way that's non-confrontational or non-violent, and the brothers just go back, sulk their way back to Canaan, then, look, I got my brother. I got him away from these guys. I'll tell him who he is with him, and I'm going to raise him, or I'm going to raise him, or, he's a teenager, or maybe, he's not a teenager, he's 20. He's a young guy, college age round kid. I'll take care of my brother. I'll take care of Benjamin, and we'll never think about those guys again. So that is very much a possibility here. Most people think, well, no, it's part of this game. He wants to test the brothers. I'm not so sure. That's the way I used to read it. But the way the Torah portion lays it out, I'm not so sure by having the break here that that was the intention. I'm not sure that Joseph, it was a game, it was a ruse, there was something that he did, but it wasn't to see whether the brothers would respond, but it was a way for him to get his control of Benjamin without giving away who he really is. That's, I think, at least a possibility, if not the more likely possibility. We normally think that the whole thing is just like he just wants to test them all along. I'm not so sure. Definitely a ruse, no question. But what was the end objective? As we finish this, you're not so sure. And again, I would say, I don't think we're ever going to be sure. And maybe Joseph allows both of these as possibilities. You know, maybe Joseph did say, well, we can always test them out and see if they're going to do something good. And I still wind up with them if he doesn't. If they just walk away, then they just walk away. So here's the way Vayigash begins. Vayigash elav Yehuda. So it begins with these three words. Went up to him and said, and that's the word Vayigash. What's the King James? I'm sure King James has a much better. Yeah, that's pretty close. But Vayigash is the name of the portion. It's the first word. And whether you want to translate it as went up to him, or as King James said, came up to him. This word Vayigash is not a normal word. And it has some kind of impact of approaching him in a way that was not necessarily confrontational, but possibly with the power imbalance, dangerous. That Judah in this moment is risking his life by getting this close to the Pharaoh's vizier, the next most powerful man in Egypt. He just got up way too close into his face. So Vayigash is not the common word for approached or went to. Vayavo would be he went to, came to him. Joseph. Yeah, so Judah, no, it's okay. Judah went up to him, Joseph, and said, please, my Lord. And remember, this is the way the portion begins, right? So the portion begins just like, oh my gosh, that's the way. So the next episode begins with this scene. Please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, you who are the equal of Pharaoh. So you can see he uses the word avdecha twice. I'm your servant, right? He uses that word twice. He calls him Lord twice. And he says, you are like Pharaoh. So there's no question that Judah right away comes up to him with an appeal to his ego. Yeah, I'm nothing. I'm a servant. You're Lord. And the Lord, but Lord, Adoni. It's the word we use for Adonai, but in Hebrew, it's Lord. I say that's why it's translated as Lord with a lowercase L. But Judah is very bold in his confrontation and there's getting in Joseph's face, but he's very humble. So his words are not aggressive. His words are not seen in any way as being anything but submissive and humble and recognizing Joseph's power. And he says to him, my Lord asked his servants, have you a father or another brother? And we told my Lord, we have an old father and there's a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother, and his father dotes on him. So Judah has now told him what's happened. To him. He's now just told Joseph what their version of events of what happened to Joseph is. Because he said his full brother is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother. Now, he doesn't know his brother's dead. Last time he saw his brother, he sold him into slavery. And it was Judah's idea. So nobody knows better than Judah what happened. Now he says that his mother's dead too, but they don't get into that. But he says, we told my Lord that his full brother is dead. So it's not clear when they first talked to him that they said he was dead. They said he was gone, or he said he's no more, which is different. He said he is no more. Inenu. Now he said he's dead. So if there's any question of what Judah had said before, he said, I told you he's dead. Now I told you he's gone. I'm telling you he's dead. You said to your servants, you said to us, right? Bring him down to me that I may set my eyes on him. We said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave him, his father would die. We told you that. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, do not let me see your faces. When we came back to your servant, my father, we are reported my Lord's words to him. Later, our father said, go back and procure some food for us. And we answered, we cannot go down only if our youngest brother is with us. Only if our younger brother is with us can we go down. For we may not show our faces to that man unless our youngest brother is with us. So he's told them the story. He knows the story. Joseph knows the story. Your servant, my father, said to us, as you know, my wife bore me 2 sons, but one is gone from me. And I said, alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow. Now that's a pretty good retelling of what Jacob had said.
Mhm.
Now, what's interesting is that now Judah just said something which is a lie. He knows it's a lie. Joseph 100% knows it's a lie because he's there. We know it's a lie. And now Judah has just told us this has been the lie that we've been telling our family for 20 years. Now, at that moment, I want to just point out to you the reality of what just happened, because most people don't know this and most people don't talk about it and most people don't really recognize it. This is the first time that Joseph knows for sure that they told him he was dead. Because before they said he was no more. Now, without question, Jacob, he's now heard for the first time that his fathers thought he was dead the whole time. Because right there, he said he was torn by a beast, which is that story of ripping up the coat, putting blood on it, which he didn't tell him that whole story. I mean, he's not going to tell him that story because, then he's basically giving away that he lied. You're how do you even tell that story? He didn't tell the story. He got to the point, which is we told our dad, our brother. Now, remember, they don't really tell him that. They bring him the coat. It's covered in blood. And they say, what do you think, Dad? Dad says, I think he's torn by one. I think he's been killed. This is his coat. There's no question. This is the only identifying stuff that we have, which, by the way, if you think about how amazingly cunning and crazy that is, because they give their father the only piece of evidence that you could have that it was Joseph, the coat of many colors, that he was his own son. And the only thing they give back to their father is this piece of evidence, which confirms that he's dead without showing him a body. It's terrible. It's brilliant, but it's also a terrible thing to do. And they had it because of that coat. So anyways, now Joseph has heard this. And they've now told him what their father has said. And here's the point. Now he says to him, now, if I come to your servant, my father is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. and your servants will send the white head of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in grief. So he says it will kill our father. He's going to die if this happens. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, I'll stand guilty before my father forever. So he says to Joseph, I pledge my own life for Benjamin. And I said that I'm guilty. I'm responsible for my brother. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. And so Judah here says very clearly, let me take his place. I will take Benjamin's place. Now remember, Judah's like 30 years older than Benjamin. I mean, Judah's already had grandkids by this point. He's basically just said, I will take his place. I will be responsible. How can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father. And that's the way the chapter ends. The way the Christian scholars put it, that's a good way to end it, which is with this rhetorical question, right? I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be responsible for that. Now, of course, he doesn't realize how powerful what he said was, because he's basically appealing to the welfare of Jacob. He doesn't just say it's for my brother, Benjamin. It's so that my father doesn't die. Now, of course, he's also saying for our father not to die. And on top of it, Joseph has just learned for the first time in 20 years that his father didn't forget about him.
Mhm.
His father 100% thinks he's been dead the whole time, torn by a wild beast. There is no, I'm a slave, let me go find my son. He's a slave somewhere.
Mm-mm.
My son disappeared. Let's find out where he is. Brothers just flat out told Joseph unknowingly, your father was grief-stricken by your death. It almost killed him, and this will be the final straw. And so Joseph, for the first time, might have heard the first time in 20 years that his death, or his, just the knowledge that his father has of his ruined his father. And this now is maybe changed his whole outlook on who he is.
And something else happened too at the same time. He saw that Judah wasn't selfish and wanting Benjamin to be the guilty one and lost and doesn't make any difference. He was not indifferent to Benjamin's fate or his father's fate. He was a human being.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting because you're right. Absolutely right. It's interesting that the appeal is more towards the father.
Yeah, but the other was obvious too.
Yes. But the fact that he keeps appealing to the father is interesting. And
Yeah.
it's even more interesting because it's ironically going to hit Joseph in that place. But yes, 100% is that now Joseph is seen, oh yeah, he's trying to protect Benjamin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Benjamin
Right.
is just like him. Benjamin is the father's golden child. He's Rachel's
Right.
son. He's the child. He's the youngest child. If he's loved as a child of an old age, he's even more old age. He was even older when Benjamin was born. This is the last child that he had. He must really love Benjamin. And yet here he is. Judah is trying to defend him, which means that he is now running back his life and maybe thinking to himself, maybe it was me. Maybe I as a 17-year-old kid telling my brothers that they're all going to bow down to me, walking around, strutting around like I'm head of the house and making these older guys that are in their 30s feel like they're garbage. Maybe I was a little bit responsible for the way that my brothers felt about me.
Mhm.
Because guess what? It wasn't the fact that I was a child of Rachel. It wasn't the fact that I was a child of my father's old age, because Benjamin ticks off both of those boxes. And yet they seem to like Benjamin a lot. They're willing to risk their lives for Benjamin. So maybe
Mhm.
my whole narrative was wrong. And so crushing down on Joseph right now is this whole story of what his whole narrative, his whole story of who he is and where he came from and who wronged him and everything else is coming down. It's crashing down on him.
There's an awakening here.
Yeah. But it must have been a pretty tough moment for Joseph, because of all he ever believed about himself up until that moment in regards to his family and where he came from in his first 20 years of his life or so, has now just been unplugged, which of course doesn't mean that it's just those years, because it's affected every other year of his life. The fact that he didn't want to go back home, the fact that he wanted to forget his father's house, all of those things that we know that he's still walking around with, the baggage he's still walking around with, he's now been faced with, oh my gosh, who am I? What's my story? What's my real story?
Mhm.
Have any other comments as we now get into what I call the big reveal?
Well,
Right.
there's one aspect, Rabbi, and that's that Joseph, upon meeting with his brothers, chose to be deceitful rather than honest and fair with them.
So what's your takeaway from that?
That's part of his character.
Interesting. That's interesting, right? Because that shows us that Joseph does want to have Joseph would rather play, I won't say would rather play games, but he is, well, he's definitely not telling him who he really is. That's for
Right.
sure. He's not tipping his hand. So this scene right here is where the break happens in the chapter. This is with Judah's last line. I can't see it. Not only can I not be responsible for it, I don't want to see it. So keep me here because I don't want to see it. Joseph could no longer control himself. Before all of his attendants, he cried out, and again, there are other people here, have everyone withdraw from me. So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear. And so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Now that's an important line, right? Because it says that Joseph's game is over at this point. Even if he, like, whatever happens next, it doesn't matter. Because Joseph's breaking down here in this moment is going to get back to, he gets back to his boss. Because the Egyptians now know something's gone on. So Joseph played this whole game. And again, as I've gotten older and maybe seen more and become a little wiser and experienced stuff myself and seen stuff myself, I've come to the conclusion that Joseph's game was not what he thought it was going to be. Because I don't think Joseph wanted to be exposed. I don't think Joseph wanted to. I mean, when he sends the people away, it's because he doesn't want them to see him go lose it. Clear. But he does it anyways. So what I think is interesting about this is as I kind of read it more carefully and again, experiencing things more, I think this backfired on Joseph. I think Joseph was not expecting, not only was he not expecting this outcome, that the easy thing to say is that he wasn't expecting the outcome that the brothers would defend the brother. That's the way I've always read it. That's the simplest way. That's, the game. It turned out that Joseph, like the way I always understood it was was Joseph wanted to test them, and the test came back that they loved their brother and everything's going to be okay. I've come to the conclusion, and again, the rabbis, as I said, already had this kind of conclusion, and I didn't really get it, why they even said that. Nah, this was not Joseph's game. Joseph's game was get my brother away from these other guys in a way that's not going to tip my hand, let anyone know who I really am. I'm going to have this whole ruse. No one's going to know what happened, and that's what's going to happen. I've really come to the conclusion that this just was a game that Joseph played and it backfired. Now, as it turns out, it has a happy ending, but the happy ending was not what Joseph was expecting.
Mhm.
I don't think Joseph really had as and maybe it's because like when you read it as a kid, they don't want you to think about like as a kid, you don't want to think about this level of dysfunction. Like it's a bad story. I mean, look, throwing your brother into a pit and then selling him to slavery, that's not for kids. It's not a story for kids. It's really bad. It really is bad. I mean, the Canaanite. I want to say that really, I mean, if that really happened, like assume it happened, that's a bad story. The Cain and Abel story is a bad story. It's hard to read that with kids. But I really do feel that this was not the way Joseph wanted things to go down. And again, the fact that it's a happy ending, it's a happy ending to a story that was, yeah. Well, they okay. So sobs were heard in the palace. Oh man, like everybody knows. So here's what Joseph said to his brothers: I am Joseph. I need Joseph. I'm Joseph. Is my father still well? But his brothers could not answer him. So dumbfounded were they on account of him. So they're standing there and their mouths are open and they can't respond. They're petrified. They had no idea that this was going to happen. Ani Yosef. What is the King James on that? Just I am Joseph, huh? Anybody else have any the words are Ani Yosef.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Glory's Bible says what?
It says, hold on. They were terrified at his presence. They were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence.
That's yeah. Well, that's even more.
Yeah. Well,
that's even more terrifying, right? That's even more that's even more. They're scared. So there's an interesting story about this of the I am Joseph. When I'll just show you this site. I am Joseph. So this is Nostra Aetate. This was the famous 1960, October 19th, 1960. Was the Holy Father in audience in the throne room, about 130 people from the UJA, from the Federation of Money, because that's normally what the United Jewish Appeal did, right? But so they come to him, they came to the pontiff, to Pope John the 23rd, this amazing Pope, John the 23rd. And the Pope brought them in, and he was responsible for what we call Nostra Aetate, the Vatican II Council.
What, that's the Pope.
Uh-huh. And he famously said to the people, here's the line. I don't know if I didn't get the line. He said to them, I am Joseph, your brother, Ani Yosef. And what's so powerful about that is his name was Joseph Roncalli. That was his name. That was his birth name, Joseph. And this was the guy who said after the Holocaust, this can't continue. The anti-Semitism that is present in the church has to change. And it has to change as an ecclesiastical mission. I mean, literally, we have to rewrite the church law. We have to rewrite the prayers. We have to make sure that everything else is done from now on differently when it comes to the Jews. We can't have those pieces and expect for there not to be anti-Semitism in our religion. So this Nostra Aetate ended up becoming pretty much the beginning of a whole shift in the world towards Jews in the church. No, not every religion, not every form of Christianity did, but it helped change the dynamic. And the Vatican II Council and the statement that ended up eventually, I mean, that was the initial statement that from that meeting, Nostra Aetate, that ended up becoming, again, the basis for, at least the largest church in the world changing its dimensions. And again, it was the first thing. It wasn't the last thing. And again, Protestant churches didn't have to follow it. And they also changed for lots of reasons. One of them, you make the argument, had to do with Israel and the close connection that Baptist and evangelical churches had with Israel. All of this started coming about after the one we argue, I would say, Vatican II and what happened after the church made a concerted effort, the Catholic Church made a concerted effort to expunge the anti-Semitism and the approach to Judaism that they took responsibility helped lead to the Holocaust. They weren't responsible for the Holocaust. Nobody said that. They didn't say it. Jews haven't said it. Nobody said it, but it was a contributing factor. Thousands of years of anti-Semitism from within the Catholic Church fed the kind of anti-Semitism that you felt in Catholic countries. Because again, Germany was split between Catholic and Protestant, but most of the countries where Jews were murdered by Nazis and by populations. And this is why we're talking about it in Ukraine now, why it's been brought up and why it was brought up in Poland and why it was brought up in Lithuania, is because those were Catholic countries. Poland is a very Catholic country. Lithuania is a very Catholic country. The Ukraine that was kind of given power by the Nazis was the Catholic part of the Ukraine. The Orthodox side was not given the same power that the Catholic Ukrainians were. So again, it's not that every Catholic participated in the Holocaust, but there are a lot of the places where the Holocaust was perpetrated with ferocious zeal were Catholic countries. So the Catholic Church knew that. And one of the other people who was very responsible for fostering those relationships was Pope John Paul II, who was from Poland and who experienced that anti-Semitism in his native country during World War II. So yeah, help rescue Jews. But there were a lot of people who said that Pope Pius, who was the Pope during the Holocaust, was responsible for the murder of Jews and willingly and knowingly, helped the Nazis, in certain situations because of the agreement that the Catholic Church had with Hitler and the Nazi regime, that their property would be protected as long as they didn't speak out against Nazism. So Hitler was from Catholic family. He was Austrian. And Austria was always more Catholic in orientation. I don't want to simplify it, but the reason that Austria was not part of Germany in the first place was because Catholics in Bavaria didn't want to be part of Protestant Germany. It's much more complicated than that. And it's not just, yeah, but Prussia was Protestant for the most part. It's more complicated than that, but Germans definitely were split on whether they were Protestant or Catholic. And that's why those countries to some extent existed, was that Bavaria and the southern part of Germany and what became Austria were predominantly, were more Catholic. It's not that simple, but, and Hitler eventually would have persecuted the Christians too. So I have no doubt that Christianity would eventually have been purged from a Reich, but we don't know that. It never happened, but probably enough. So this line, though, I always like to point out when we read it, to me, is a line that resonates because of Joseph Roncalli and because of what he did. He was truly a hero, and a lot of people say he was one of the greatest popes of all time, and he really shepherded the church through the post-war period and helped it open up. He was pope for a good amount of time, and then Pope Paul came after him, which was why John Paul I, who was only pope for like a month, he was John Paul I, and then John Paul II took over. They both combined those names of John and Paul, the previous two popes who kind of shepherded the church through the post-war. John Paul, no, that's Pope Benedict. He's still alive, and he was German, or he is German. So, and he was alive during the time. He was part of Hitler Youth as a young person. He's written about it. So Roncalli was Italian. Obviously, Pope John Paul II was Polish. And we had a we had a German Pope, Pope Benedict, and now we have an Argentinian Pope. So they're definitely moving away from just having the popes being Italian, but Roncalli was Italian. And there were a lot of Italian priests and Italian Catholics that tried to rescue Jews during the Holocaust. The Jewish Pope. There were popes who had Jewish ancestry. Anyways, so this line, I am Joseph, is his reveal. It's because he doesn't just say, I'm your brother, right? He says, I am Joseph, right? And his next line is my father still well? Well, he just told him about it. It's a weird thing to say, because they just told him that the father's old, and that if they come back without Benjamin, he's going to die. But what he really wants to know is, but is he okay? And I know you would, but it's funny because they just talked about him. It isn't like he doesn't know whether he's still alive. He knows he's still alive, but his actual question is he well, right? Is he okay? And I will tell you this. That's the translation. Give me the King James translation, Mary. So I will say they took a little liberty with it. I get the point, but I'm going to show you because you can read it and you know the word. The word says, Avichai, is my father alive? So yeah, well, they translated it wrong because he's just said that their father's alive. So, obviously Chai here means more than just alive. Is he doing okay? Which is why they translated that. Or there's the possibility that Joseph really is still wondering, is my father still alive? Because you guys have been lying a lot. Is he still alive? Just tell me the truth. Is he still alive? Is he still there? And whatever. I mean, to some extent, Avichai means more than is my father alive or is my father well? It's literally saying, my father's your father, right? This is the connector that we all have. And you're right, Mike, it is what you'd say, because if they hadn't just said it, then it wouldn't be so weird. But by saying is my father, is my father well, is our father well, he's reminding him of the connection, because he's basically saying, yeah, it's me. And I'm asking the question, your exact point is, I'm asking the question that you'd expect him to ask if the whole thing wasn't a ruse before. So it's almost as if he stepped out and the whole thing has now been restarted. He's literally just stepped out where he was and said, I'm Joseph. So all the stuff that you just saw, the whole charade, the charade of him coming, out as an Egyptian with an Egyptian son. And now he says, I'm Joseph. Is my father okay? Is my father okay? Well, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. Now you're ruining the story because we don't know what they're going to do. But his line, is my father still well, is almost as if I've thrown out all that other stuff, right? All that show is over. And now it's me. And now I want to know, is my father okay? Wow. And it's dumbfounding. I mean, you really are. And when you read it like we read it and not just read it real quick, you really do come away with the power of this story, which is that, oh my God, this story is a long story. So is my father alive? Is my father alive? Avichai. There's actually a Jewish organization, by the way. Ani Yosef, Joseph, my brother, is important. Avichai, there's actually a Jewish organization. I think they're based in Boston, which is a Jewish organization, which is about Jewish continuity. It's about, it's dedicated, it's a philanthropist started it, 20, 30 years ago. And its job is to work towards Jewish education and to fund Jewish education and Jewish initiatives. It's called the Avichai Foundation. It's not my father lives. That's not why they called it that. They called it that because that is the reveal. That's the reveal of what Joseph says. I am Joseph, Avichai. I'll just see if I can show you. If I show you the Avichai Foundation. Yeah. Oh, wow. Here, I'll show you. I think they're coming to an end. I think they're wrapping up the organization. I thought that might be the case. So here's the Avichai Foundation. Yeah, it concluded its general grant making on December 31st, 2019. So what does it say? Avichai is a private foundation endowed by the Zalman Bernstein that is committed to the perpetuation of Jewish people, Judaism, and the centrality of the state of Israel to the Jewish people. So, and it's basically winding down. Yeah, they're Sam. Yeah. So they're winding up. Anyways, yeah, it's kind of cool though that there was an organization based on these two words. So, so Joseph then said to his brothers, "Come forward to me." And when they came forward, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, he whom you sold into Egypt." So he says it to them again, Ani Yosef. And now he says, I am, yeah. He says, I am your brother Joseph. That's actually what Roncalli said. He didn't say I am Joseph. He said, I'm Joseph, your brother. Yeah. He actually said the second time, Ani Yosef Achichem. Because that's the funny thing, is that he has to say, no, I'm Joseph, your brother Joseph, right? Yes. So now, exactly. So now he says, not only I'm your brother, I'm not just a Joseph. How's my dad doing? I'm not random. He's not saying anything. Oh, I'm your brother Joseph. Come on, guys. I'm your brother Joseph, who you sold. So he reminds them who he is, right? He reminds them what they did to him. You remember? I remember. You sold me into Egypt. Now they're in Egypt. So the fact that, maybe they didn't know he was going to wind up in Egypt for sure. I don't know. I mean, they could ask the traders where you're going. We're going to Egypt. Could be. Maybe they didn't even care. But the point is that they also could have thought their brother was dead from the moment that they sold him into slavery. He might as well be dead. His lifespan probably wouldn't have been much longer than this. So he says to them, we're in Egypt and you sold me here. He doesn't just say you sold me into slavery. You sold into Egypt. It's interesting, right? Because he doesn't say you sold me into the slave. You sold me here. So here he says to them, come forward to me. And the root that he uses, geshu, which is the vayigash, right? So now he's come forward, approach me. Now he's telling them to come forward. So when Judah did it, and it says, vayigashu, they came forward to him. This is more than, again, just they came to him, but they came up to him. They're in his presence. They're in his space, if you will. And he says to them, this is the whole text, what he tells them. Now do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me here. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now, and here he says it actually, 2 years that there's been famine in the land. So this has only been going on for 2 years. We talked about this before. It actually says it's been 2 years. Yeah, it's been 2 years. And there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. So we're not even, we're not even halfway through this. We're like a third of the way through it. This is going to be bad. So he says right away, don't be upset because you did this. You did do it, right? He doesn't say because I'm here. He says, you sold me here. So he doesn't let them off the hook, which I think is interesting. He doesn't just say that, but he says, look, this was part of God's plan. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. So he's already now telling them that he has put his situation now into a context of this was a miracle. This is part of God's plan. Now, when did he come up with this idea? When did he come up with this? When did he reformulate his life? It had to be in the last few minutes. Now, some people don't like that, which is why I think they fall back to this idea that Joseph was setting this up all along. But it doesn't seem that way. It really doesn't seem that way. The more likely answer is that he just reformulated his whole life. In 2 or 3 minutes, he just recontextualized his whole life. He just reordered it. Correct. But how, it just shows you how quickly, I'm just pointing this out for everybody here who's ever had something bad happen to their lives or something good happen to their lives, you could say, on the other hand, because it happens both ways. Look how quickly he reframed his whole life. Most of the time we'd say, if somebody laid down this information to me and now hit me with the fact that my father thought I was dead the whole time, that my brother didn't hate me because I was the child of a different mother. My brother just hated me because I was a jerk. Oh, there's a reason why I'm here. God had a plan for this. It turns out I didn't really want to forget my father's home. Turned out that maybe this was all good. In a moment, in literally the time that it took him to see his brothers and start talking to his brothers, which was a matter of minutes, he's now reevaluated his whole life. I just think that's amazing. And I also think, by the way, that it's true. Because normally we say, oh no, I got to go home and I got to think about this for a few days. I don't know. I can't ever accept this. No, I don't care. It's too much. I can tell you that this story, as weird as it is, as hard as it is, this is really bad. This is a really bad story. Guy gets thrown into prison, gets slavery, gets almost killed, and yet now he's forgiven his brothers, and now he's actually reevaluated this horrible existence for the last 20 years. And it's okay that it's God's will. It means that we can really change our attitude pretty quick. That given the right circumstances or the reality that life is what we decide it's going to be, it doesn't take a long time. We don't have to go, no, I've got to go away for a few days and think about this. I mean, you could. I mean, there's nobody saying you have to. Nobody says you have to change your attitude in a moment. But he just did it. And people have done it before. And he's not the first person who's done this before. There are people who've changed their whole framework of how they see themselves and have done it in a moment. He just did it. Happens. I can say it's happened to me. Yeah. People have the ability to see their lives in completely different ways in a moment. And it just happened to Joseph right in front of us. It just happened to somebody who has every reason to not want to give up on any of those feelings because he can't get back that time. You know, the counter argument to this is, I've just wasted 20 years of my life, good years of my life, most of them. He has kids now, but you know, he's had some good stuff in the last 6 or 7 years, but most of the last 20 years have been horrible. And I don't want to give up on my hatred, and I don't want to give up on my anger, and I don't want to give up on my resentment, and I don't want to stop hating. But he does. Oh, he doesn't forget. His forgiveness and his retelling, recontextualizing, reordering the story, but he doesn't forget. He said it to him twice. You sold me into slavery. You sold me into Egypt. You sold me here, whatever. He didn't say sold. Well,
Rabbi, these kinds of changes frequently happen after divorce. There could be anger, and then a realization that anger is not useful. What is the good that can come out of this? And I have seen it.
I think you're right. I think divorce is probably the closest to this situation that most of us ever get, because it's those feelings of betrayal, those feelings of wasted time. It's those feelings of
Right.
of anger and bitterness and vindictiveness and all those kinds of things. Yeah.
And you can either be angry at the divorced spouse or loving toward the children and accepting that that was the children's mother or father, and not be vindictive or punishing or letting go of the anger and looking for the good. And it can happen. I lived it.
I think
I lived it.
I think you're right, and that this is probably the most common. Now we have other ones, right? We have
Yes.
situations with families that are, can be about finances, or they can be about, love, somebody perceiving that somebody loved them more, and all those kinds of things can also happen. I mean, very similar to this situation, right? Very similar to the Joseph and his brother situation. But you're right. Like for what most people would connect with, or what's the most common situation that people find themselves in that's similar to this, it is divorce. Mary, you were saying something too. Yeah. Yeah. So Mary said, in case you couldn't hear, that this is the big picture that God, that he's seen now, he's part of a big picture.
Right.
And I think that what's interesting about what Mary said is that when you think about Joseph, when you juxtapose this against Joseph, who's this great visionary, right? Who's this great dreamer, the reality is he now has to do it to his own life. He now actually has to reevaluate and now see his own life in a way that maybe he was good at figuring out what was good for all of Egypt, but he hadn't figured out what was good for him. I'm not sounding like a psychiatrist now, and maybe I am psychologist, but the reality is that that's what is Mary's point is that that's what he does now, which is he is he's now
He's able to broaden his context and
Yeah.
look at the larger whole and not just what happened to him, but what is the whole realistic situation and the benefits and the harm
yeah.
and weigh them.
And you can argue that, look, this guy's been through trauma. I mean, flat out, guy's been traumatized. He's been through horrific things, traumatic.
Yes,
So no one would you can't really not but feel bad for him. But the reality is that this moment is the time that he finally maybe really became an adult, where it wasn't just about him,
right,
that it really wasn't just about what do I need, which is I need vengeance.
right,
He named his sons these names. I need to forget. I need to run away from that. I need to put that in another part of my consciousness that I never see or hear or think about. And now finally he's saying, my whole life, maybe there are things that I can do. Maybe there's things that I'm a part of that are bigger than me. Maybe there's things that, again, are not just about me.
obviously.
And I think that people sometimes don't realize that until, like you're Joseph, that you've had a little bit of life. And unfortunately, there's people who never see that. There are a lot of people who never get to see or never get to feel that moment of saying, you know what, this isn't about me. And Joseph just did it. Joseph is still, again, as we said, he hasn't forgotten who he is. He hasn't forgotten what's happened.
Right,
He's not said, yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't even remember. But he's now put his life into a picture, a part of the bigger picture. And he's now really kind of he's finally a man in a way. And this is an amazing thing to see this happen. So one of our friends, I do want to share because he's on Facebook all the time, but he's not part of the Zoom, is Kyle. Kyle posted up on our TBA Facebook page as he's reading and studying with us right now. He want to share this and I thought it was a nice insight. He said there's a couple of things that he said, but he said he was that literally he is now come back from the, and that he is his purpose was to save life. His purpose was to save life. And I think Kyle's point is an important one, because what could there be higher purpose than that? Is saving someone's life. And maybe now he finally realized that all of his power, all his gifts, all of what he's done for Egypt, and now he's done for his family, and he's done for lots of other people who've come down for food, is he's been saving a life. He's been saving not a life, but many lives. But every life that he saved was a miracle. And now maybe he can finally see his life for all the good that he's done. Because up until that time, what maybe motivated Joseph was not doing good things, but becoming powerful and winning and not giving back. Because maybe all this was for him was, look where I came from and look where I am now. And that isn't this is not obviously what God wants from us. We're not here to say, look what I came from and look where I am now. Can't be. Life has got to be more than that. And then Neil Scott said he likes my hat. Thanks, Neil. But Neil, you're watching, so I'm not going to make fun of that. If you want to watch my hat, I'll wear a different hat every week as long as you come on. God has set me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. And so now he says this was God's plan to survival on earth and to save your lives in extraordinary deliverance, miraculous deliverance.
What is that?
What the note is? A father to Pharaoh. I don't know. Let's take a look. So the word is Av Pharaoh, which seems to be father of Pharaoh. Av or Abba, right, means father. But they're saying that there's another place in Isaiah where Av Pharaoh clearly means a chancellor to Pharaoh. So it could be not literally his father, is what they're saying. Yeah. So the question is this a title, or is this Joseph's take on what he is to him? Here they went with, this is Joseph's take on what he is to him, and not this is his title. Yeah. Well, he's definitely thinks he's very important. He doesn't think he's unimportant. So what's interesting about this, and I do want to make this point, because as much as Joseph has recontextualized and now reevaluated his life and why he is who he is, he still has not given up on his ego. Because this line tells us he's still Joseph, which is, look, that's it. You don't change who you are. Your personality doesn't change. Even when your perspective changes, even when your feeling of what my mission in the world is has totally been reevaluated. I've changed the way I think I'm here, what I'm here for. You don't change your personality. You don't change the way you present yourself. Yeah, he doesn't. He's not giving up on his titles or on his clothing. He's their brother now, but he's still Joseph. And that's what's interesting about this. And I think it's very real. I think it's beautiful that Joseph is Joseph. Joseph is still going to be Joseph. But look, he now says, I'm here for a reason. And the reason was not to get vengeance on you. The reason was not to show everybody that I'm not some hick from Canaan. I'm not a shepherd boy. No, I'm here. And he's still thinking that, right? Because who else but a shepherd boy says, I'm the Pharaoh, I'm the father of Pharaoh, I'm the Lord of his house, I'm the ruler of all land of Egypt. That's somebody who still has a little bit of insecurity left inside. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You will dwell in the region of Goshen, Eretz Goshen, the land of Goshen, where near me. You and your children and your grandchildren, your flock, herds, and all that is yours. There will I provide for you and for the next 5 years of famine to come, that you and your household and all that is yours may not suffer want. Now, at that point right there, you're going to come down to Goshen, which is part of Egypt. And by the way, that's where we are when we're slaves in the land of Goshen. We're still living in that land of Goshen later on. But here it really seems, if you read it, stay there for the next 5 years. Because there won't be any food up there, but there'll be food here in Egypt and in Goshen. And you can be here with your flocks and your herds and all that is yours. Well, that's the plan, right? That's a great plan. Get our dad, come down. I know that's our land. I'm not saying he should move here permanently, but for the next 5 years, you got to be here. You got to be here in Egypt. You can see for yourselves, and my brother Benjamin for himself, that it is indeed I who am speaking with you. And so what he's telling them here is, no, I know you're still looking at me like I'm crazy and that you're having a dream, but it's me. And that's what he says. It's me. You must. Well, that's the interesting thing. Yeah, that Benjamin has really never been a part of him, but part of his life. You can see and my brother Benjamin for himself, which is kind of like separating Benjamin from the rest of them. There's no doubt about it. Now that line, when he says Benjamin for himself, why would you even say that? He's speaking to all of them. You must tell my father everything about my high station in Egypt and all that you've seen, and bring my father here with all speed. With that, he embraced his brother Benjamin around the neck and wept, and Benjamin on his neck. And again, here's this kind of falling on the neck part, which we read about with Jacob and his brother Esau. And here it's very clear that it's a loving embrace, and that he embraces his brother Benjamin. That's who he embraces, right? He embraces Benjamin, his full brother. And it says that Benjamin wept on his neck. So they both cried. They both cried. And then he kissed all his brothers and wept on them. Only then were his brothers able to talk. So makes sense. He gets Benjamin, his full brother, first, his baby brother, who he never really got to see. But he hugs all of his brothers. And it says that only when he hugged them were they able to talk to him. So that connection that he made with them physically was actually the last step. He couldn't just communicate with words. He couldn't just tell them what was happening. He had to hug them. He had to kiss them. And this is a very powerful scene, obviously, of brothers, of siblings who wind up being able to be together when there's every reason that they never would have ever talked to each other, even if there had been a reveal, even if he had told them who he was. That's why this story is so powerful, because every story we've read in Genesis up until this point has been brothers from the very beginning who can't get along. With the first brothers, where one kills the other. And so what actually happens in the book of Genesis is we get to this point right here, where brothers can not only forgive each other, as they did in the generation before, when Esau and Jacob forgive each other, but here, where they live together and really forgive each other and love each other. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come, and Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. This is good. They're happy this has happened, which tells us that Pharaoh's a good guy. And the courtiers, good people, good people. Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do as follows. Load up your beasts and go at once to Canaan. And you could say, if he just said that, go back home. Right? I'm happy you're here, but go back home. Nope. Take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land. Well, that's funny because Joseph just gave him permission to already live there. So Pharaoh's a little late to the game. Right? Pharaoh has just come in and said, you can live here and live amongst us and we'll all be good. Now, I want to point out, everybody needs to see what just happened. Pharaoh just said to Joseph's brothers, come and live in Egypt, the best of the land of Egypt, and live off the fat of the land. Now you, I hope, have caught what just happened. He just said something different than what Joseph said. Joseph said you can live in the land of Goshen. Pharaoh just said you can live anywhere in Egypt. And not only that, I'm going to give you everything that you ever wanted. Joseph didn't say that. Joseph just said you can pasture your flocks and live in the land of Goshen for the next 5 years. Pharaoh didn't say that. Pharaoh said, come and live off the fat of the land. It's a completely different thing. Completely different. Now you're going to go, well, it's the same thing. They're all going to live in the land of Egypt. That's not what Pharaoh just did. Pharaoh just gave them permission to live anywhere they want, do whatever they want, to eat whatever they want, to be with them. That is not what Joseph said. What? Yes. So now we have to ask ourselves a very important, which of course the rabbis did ask us. Yes, as Kyle just said, the snake told them to have all you want. Pharaoh, speaking as an Egyptian, basically says, come here and be an Egyptian. Joseph doesn't say that. Now, why does Joseph not say that? The traditional answer is that Joseph wants his brothers to not assimilate. That if they stay in the land of Goshen and pasture their flocks and live there, they won't live like Egyptians, like he lives. Now, what's interesting about this is that most people have traditionally seen this as Joseph wants his brothers to be protected. There's another possibility, which is even hinted at in the rabbinical period, that Joseph didn't want his brothers hanging around. That for all of Joseph's forgiveness, that Joseph is, you know what? These are country bumpkins. They're always going to be country bumpkins. They're the Beverly Hillbillies. I don't want them living in Beverly Hills. They can live in the Valley. They can live in Palmdale. They can live in Santa Clarita, but I don't want them in Beverly Hills. And that's the other possibility, is he doesn't want them like that. Not because they shouldn't be there because it'll be bad for them, but I don't want to see them because they'll be a reminder to everybody else of where I really came from. And that this is Joseph's intent. That's a darker intent, which is that he doesn't want to be seen with these people. Is it a possibility? Yes, it's a possibility, because there are many stories of people who've become very successful who, as much as they want their families to live off of their success, just stay back at home. Continue to live in North Carolina or wherever, but you're not coming to LA. New York. That is a possibility. But it also is the possibility that he does not want them to go down this same hole of materialism and lack of connection to their ways that Joseph knows is not what they're supposed to be. And Joseph says for 5 years. Joseph doesn't intend for them to stay here forever, whereas Pharaoh wants them to stay there forever. Pharaoh has no need, he has no desire for them ever to go back. And if they assimilate, then they're gone. There won't be Israelites anymore. There will be no Israelites. That's what Pharaoh's plan is, which, by the way, if Jews had assimilated thousands of years ago, if they had assimilated 150 years ago, and when they first were allowed to integrate back into European culture in the early 1800s with the Enlightenment, there wouldn't have been any Jews in Germany to be murdered, which was one of Theodor Herzl's actual original ideas when he was a young man, which is that Jews need to stop being Jewish. It'd be much better if they just all became German, or if they all, I mean, he was Hungarian, but he was a lover of German stuff. He didn't speak Hungarian, he spoke German. He was one of those kind of Hungarians who was much more a germaphobe. He was part of the same kinds of cultural clubs that celebrated German identity, which some of the later early proto-Nazis were a part of, because it was about German exceptionalism. But letting you know that there was a tendency by Jews in the early 1900s of assimilating as fast as we can so that we don't wind up being different. And what the Holocaust taught us was that that's not the way to go, which is why, of course, Herzl became a Zionist instead of being an assimilationist. Yep. That's the point. If Pharaoh had had his way right here, we assimilate and we're done. If Joseph doesn't say, hey, let's go live in Goshen, live off the fat of the land of Egypt, we're gone. And this has always been the challenge for the Jewish community. How do we retain our identity, especially in times of success? Because this is the issue now. Not that they're going to be disenfranchised, but that they're going to be welcomed into the land of Egypt. And here's what he says. We're going to finish with this part right here. And you are bidden to add, do as follows: take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here. And never mind your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt shall be yours. This is where we're going to finish today, even though it's not the end
Wow.
of it's the end of this idea, which is if the Pharaoh had their way, as Mike just said, we would have disappeared 3,400 years ago. Because this is a critical moment, not when we're slaves, not when we're oppressed, but when we're literally told, don't bring anything. Get on down here. The best of the land of Egypt is yours. We love you. You don't need to worry about anything. Don't. Exactly. It's scary because we see how precarious this moment is and what really happened. Now, here's the irony. We already said, and just leave it with this. Joseph protected them. Did he protect them because he wanted to protect them and he wanted them to be able to go back? Or did he protect them because he was embarrassed by them? Whatever the reason is, you and I know we're still here because of that
Yep.
decision that Joseph made to keep in the land of Goshen, because that's not what the Pharaoh said. That's not what the Pharaoh said. Take my car, take our cars, the Egyptian wagons. That's what he says. Take our cars, go up there, take the trucks, the moving trucks, and you don't even need the moving trucks. You're coming back down in a Cadillac. That's what you're coming down in. You're not coming down with it on a donkey. You're going with Egyptian wagons. And that was the equivalent in those days. The most technologically advanced automobiles. The Duesenberg. It's a classic car. And it is a Tesla. You get a Tesla. You know, that's where we're going to leave it. So folks, we'll see you next week. And again, just when you thought we're safe. All right, everybody. Dinner. What's the Dodger score, Mike? 3-1. There you go.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Good seeing you all. Love you all.
Thank you.
Love you, Joy.
Good night.